The guitar stopped mid-note. Carlos Santana stood frozen in the doorway of the backstage dressing room, his Yamaha SG still strapped around his neck, his fingers hovering over strings that had suddenly gone silent. He was staring at the man sitting quietly in the corner. A small man, Chinese, wearing a simple black shirt and dark pants, reading a newspaper as if he were waiting for a bus, not sitting backstage at one of the biggest concerts of the year. Carlos had met presidents. He had jammed with Jimi Hendrix. He had performed for 500,000 people at Woodstock. Nothing surprised him anymore. But this surprised him, because the man in the corner was Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee was supposed to be in Hong Kong, filming a movie on the other side of the world. Not here. Not at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. Not backstage at Carlos Santana's sold-out show. Bruce looked up from his newspaper, smiled that famous smile. "Hello, Carlos. I came to hear you play." What happened in the next 4 hours would become one of the most legendary untold stories in both men's lives. A musician who fought with his guitar, a martial artist who moved like music, and a night that neither of them would ever forget. Santa Monica, California, July 23, 1972. The Santa Monica Civic Auditorium was packed with 3,000 people. Carlos Santana and his band were at the height of their fame. Abraxas had been released 2 years earlier. Black Magic Woman was still dominating radio. Oi Como Va had become an anthem. Carlos was 24 years old. Bruce Lee was 31. They had never met, but they had been circling each other for months. Carlos had become obsessed with Bruce Lee's films after watching The Big Boss at a theater in San Francisco. Something about the way Bruce moved captivated him. The rhythm, the flow, the explosive bursts followed by perfect stillness. It reminded him of music, not just any music, his music. The way a guitar solo builds and releases. The way percussion drives forward and then stops. The way silence between notes is just as important as the notes themselves. Carlos had told his manager he wanted to meet Bruce Lee. The manager had laughed. "Bruce Lee? The Kung Fu guy? What do you want with him?" "I want to understand how he moves," Carlos said. "There is something in his movement that I hear in my music. I need to understand what it is." The manager had tried to arrange a meeting, but Bruce was impossible to reach. He was filming in Hong Kong. He was in Rome for Way of the Dragon. He was everywhere except where Carlos was. So Carlos had given up. Until tonight. Until Bruce Lee walked into his dressing room unannounced, sat down in the corner, and started reading a newspaper. "How did you get back here?" Carlos asked, still frozen in the doorway. Bruce folded the newspaper neatly. "I told security I was a friend of yours." "We have never met." Bruce smiled. "I know, but I will be your friend by the end of tonight. I am certain of it." Carlos finally moved. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, set his guitar carefully on its stand. "Why are you here?" "I came to see you perform," Bruce said. "I have been listening to your music for months. There is something in it that I recognize. Something I have been trying to put into words." "What?" "Flow." Carlos sat down across for Bruce. "Flow," he repeated. Bruce nodded. "In martial arts, we talk about being like water, moving without resistance, adapting to circumstances, never forcing, always flowing. When I listen to your guitar, I hear that same principle. You do not fight the music. You become the music." Carlos was silent for a moment. Then he laughed. "You know something? I have been trying to explain that to musicians for years. They do not understand. They think music is about technique, about playing the right notes at the right time. But it is not." "No," Bruce agreed. "It is about letting go, allowing the music to play through you." "Exactly." The two men looked at each other. Something had clicked. Some unspoken recognition. "How long are you in town?" Carlos asked. "I fly back to Hong Kong tomorrow afternoon." "Then we have tonight." Carlos stood up, grabbed his guitar. "My show starts in 2 hours. After that, we talk. We play. We explore this thing we both understand." "Deal." Bruce stood up, extended his hand. "Deal." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. The concert that night was unlike anything Carlos Santana had ever performed. He was aware of Bruce Lee watching from the wings, aware that he was performing not just for 3,000 fans, but for one man who understood movement in a way that Carlos understood music. The awareness changed him. He played differently, more freely, less concerned with perfection and more concerned with expression. He let solos run longer than planned. He let rhythms shift unexpectedly. He let the music flow. During Black Magic Woman, Carlos entered a solo that lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes of pure improvisation. His eyes closed, his body swaying, his fingers finding notes he had never played before. When he finished, the crowd erupted. But Carlos was looking offstage, looking at Bruce Lee. Bruce was nodding slowly, a small smile on his face. He understood. The show ended at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, the auditorium was empty. The crew had packed up the equipment. The fans had gone home. But Carlos Santana and Bruce Lee were still there. They sat on the empty stage. Just the two of them. Carlos with his acoustic guitar. Bruce with nothing but his presence. "Play something," Bruce said. Carlos strummed a simple chord progression. Nothing fancy, just the foundation of a melody. Bruce listened, his head tilted slightly, absorbing. Now, Bruce said, "Play it again. But this time, imagine you are fighting." Fighting? Yes. Imagine each note is a strike. Each chord is a combination. Each pause is a breath before the next attack. Carlos played again. Same progression, but different intention. The music transformed. What had been gentle became urgent. What had been flowing became explosive. The pauses were no longer rests. They were moments of coiled potential. Carlos stopped, looked at Bruce with wide eyes. "That was different," he said. "That was combat," Bruce said. Music and fighting are the same. Both are expressions of energy. Both require timing, rhythm, and intention. Both are conversations between you and something larger than yourself. Carlos set down his guitar. "Show me," he said. "Show me what you mean." Bruce stood up. He moved to the center of the empty stage. The single-work light cast dramatic shadows across his body. "Watch," he said. And then he began to move. Not a demonstration. Not a performance. Something else. Bruce began slowly. Tai chi movem. Flowing. Meditative. His arms traced circles in the air. His weight shifted like water. Then the tempo increased. Wing Chun techniques emerged. Rapid hand movements. Center-line attacks. Chain punches that blurred with speed. Then Jeet Kune Do. Kicks. Strikes. Combinations. Explosive movements that came from nowhere and returned to stillness instantly. Carlos watched, mesmerized. But he was not just watching with his eyes. He was watching with his ears. He could hear it. Every movement Bruce made had a rhythm. Every strike had a beat. Every pause had a duration that felt intentional, measured, musical. Bruce was not just fighting the air. He was playing it. When Bruce finished, he was not even breathing hard. Carlos was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his guitar. "Again," he said. "Do it again. But this time I play with you." Bruce smiled. He began to move. Carlos began to play. What happened next will be described by both men as the most profound artistic experience of their lives. Carlos did not watch Bruce and then play. He felt Bruce and played simultaneously. His guitar responded to Bruce's movements in real time. When Bruce exploded forward, Carlos played sharp, aggressive notes. When Bruce paused, Carlos let silence hang in the air. When Bruce flowed, Carlos flowed with him. They were not two artists creating separate works. They were one consciousness expressing itself through two bodies. The improvisation lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, both men were drenched in sweat. Exhausted, exhilarated. Carlos set down his guitar. His hands were trembling. "I have never experienced anything like that," he said. "Ever." Bruce nodded. "Neither have I." They sat in silence for a while, catching their breath, processing what had just happened. Finally, Carlos spoke. "What is that? What we just did? Does it have a name?" Bruce considered the question. "In Chinese, we might call it he." Becoming one. Two energies merging into a single expression. Carlos nodded slowly. "In Spanish, we would call it duende. The spirit that takes over when art becomes transcendent. When the performer disappears and something else performs through them." "Same thing," Bruce said. "Different words." Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. They talked until 4 a.m., sitting on the empty stage. The work light, their only illumination. The empty auditorium, their only witness. They discovered they had more in common than either expected. Both had faced discrimination. Bruce for being Chinese in Hollywood. Carlos for being Mexican in the American music industry. Both had been told to change themselves. Bruce was told to be less Chinese. Carlos was told to be less Latin. Both refused. Both had developed their own systems. Bruce with Jeet Kune Do. Carlos with his unique fusion of rock, blues, Latin, and jazz. Both believed in transcendence. That art was not about technique, but about channeling something larger than the self. How do you do it? Carlos asked. How do you move so fast? So precisely? Bruce thought for a moment. I do not try to move fast, he said. I try to move without resistance. Speed is not about effort. It is about removing everything that slows you down. That is what I tell my guitar students, Carlos said. Do not try to play fast. Remove the hesitation. Remove the doubt. The speed is already there, waiting. Bruce nodded. We're teaching the same thing. Different instruments. Carlos laughed. You are the instrument. Bruce smiled. And so are you. The guitar is just an extension of what you already are. They talked about training, about discipline, about the thousands of hours required to reach a level where technique disappears and only expression remains. Carlos described practicing scales until his fingers bled, then practicing more. Bruce described punching the wooden dummy until his knuckles were raw, then punching more. Both understood that mastery required suffering, that excellence demanded sacrifice, that the transcendent moments they had experienced tonight were built on years of invisible work. Do you ever doubt yourself? Carlos asked. Every day, Bruce admitted. I wake up wondering if today is the day I discover I am a fraud. That everything I have built is an illusion. Carlos was surprised. You? You doubt yourself? Everyone does. The ones who say they do not are lying. Doubt is not weakness. Doubt is the engine that drives improvement. The day I stop doubting is the day I stop growing. How do you handle it? I train harder. I study more. I push past the doubt until I reach the work. The doubt lives in my head. The work lives in my body. When I cannot trust my mind, I trust my training. Carlos nodded slowly. When I cannot trust my thoughts, I trust my hands. I pick up the guitar and play. The music always tells me the truth. At 4:30 a.m., the security guard knocked on the door. Gentlemen, we need to close the building. Bruce and Carlos stood up, stretched, laughed at how stiff they had become from sitting on the hard stage for hours. They walked outside together. The Santa Monica night was cool and quiet. The streets were empty. Carlos turned to Bruce. I need to ask you something. Anything. Tonight, when we played together, when I improvised with your movement, I saw something. In my mind. An image. What did you see? Carlos was quiet for a moment. I saw you flying, he said finally. Not jumping. Flying. Like you had left the ground and forgotten to come back down. Bruce smiled. That is the goal, he said. To move so freely that gravity becomes optional. Is it possible? Bruce looked up at the night sky. The stars faint through the city lights. I do not know, he admitted. But I intend to find out. They shook hands. Then, surprising both of them, they embraced. Two artists who had found something rare. A kindred spirit. A mirror that reflected their deepest understanding back at them. I will send you a recording of tonight, Carlos said. Of the concert, so you can hear what you inspired. And I will send you a film, Bruce said, when Enter the Dragon is finished, so you can see what you helped me understand. They parted ways. Carlos to his hotel. Bruce to the small apartment he kept in Los Angeles. They would meet only 3 more times before Bruce's death in 1973. But each meeting reinforced what they had discovered that night on the empty stage. That music and movement are the same thing. That art and combat share a common soul. That two people from completely different worlds can recognize each other instantly, if they are both pursuing the same truth. When Bruce Lee died on July 20th, 1973, Carlos Santana was on tour in Europe. He received the news backstage before a show in London. He played that night. But halfway through the concert, he stopped the band. "I need to play something," he told the confused audience. "For a friend who taught me that music and fighting are the same thing. For a man who moved like music and made music that moved like him." He played a solo improvisation that lasted 23 minutes. Those who were there described it as unlike anything they had ever heard. Aggressive and peaceful, explosive and flowing, fighting and dancing at the same time. When it ended, Carlos was crying. "That was for Bruce," he said into the microphone. "The dragon who showed me how to fly." In 1998, 25 years after Bruce Lee's death, Carlos Santana released an album called Supernatural. It won 9 Grammy Awards. The opening track was an instrumental piece that Carlos had never explained publicly. In a private interview years later, he finally revealed its origin. "That track came from the night I spent with Bruce Lee," Carlos said. "I was trying to capture what we had discovered together. That moment when two energies become one. That feeling of flying while standing still." He paused. "Every time I play it, I feel him in the room. Not as a memory, as a presence. Like he never really left." The interview asked if Carlos believed in spirits. "I believe in energy," Carlos said. "I believe that when two people create something together, that creation never dies. It lives somewhere. In the music, in the movement, in everyone who hears it or sees it." He smiled. "Bruce taught me that. In 4 hours on an empty stage. He taught me that art is eternal. That the body dies, but the expression lives forever." The recording of that night, the 47-minute improvisation of Bruce Lee moving while Carlos Santana played, was believed lost for decades. In 2019, a cassette tape was discovered in Carlos Santana's personal archives. It was labeled simply, "Santa Monica, Bruce, July 1972. The recording quality is poor. The sound is muffled. Bruce's movements are audible only as soft footfalls and occasional breathing. But Carlos's guitar is clear, and those who have heard it describe it as the most unusual recording in Carlos Santana's entire catalog. The music shifts constantly, aggressive, peaceful, explosive, still. It sounds like someone fighting and dancing simultaneously. Like combat that has become art. Like art that has become combat. The tape has never been released publicly. Carlos has said it never will be. "Some things are too sacred to share," he explained. "That night was between me and Bruce. The music belongs to that moment, to that empty stage, to two artists who found something they had been searching for their entire lives." The interviewer asked what they had found. "Each other," Carlos said simply. "We found each other. July 23rd, 1972, Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. 3,000 fans. One concert. Two artists. For hours on an empty stage. And a truth that both men carried for the rest of their lives. Music is movement. Movement is music. And when two people truly understand this, they can create something that transcends both. The dragon and the guitar player. Different worlds. Same soul. One night. Forever connected."